Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Patriot Pulse podcast and simulcasting to Two Guys Drinking Coffee. It is September 10th, 2025, and this is episode 22 if you're following with the Patriot Pulse podcast. And if you're still with us on Two Guys Drinking Coffee, is episode 226. And today we have a very special guest to bring on, a person that I consider a freedom fighter, Dr. Kirk Moore from Utah. But first, you might have noticed that Fred is not with me today. He's taking care of some personal business, so you're stuck with just me today. But I'll do my best to work it with Dr. Moore and bring you some great information. Our new format for the Patriot Pulse podcast is to talk about, or actually bring to you, people that are making a difference in this world, people that are standing up for right, standing up for liberty and justice, and standing up against the tyranny and oppression that we are seeing today. And this episode is no different. We are bringing you an interview with someone who I believe is a medical freedom fighter, and that is Dr. Kirk Moore. Dr. Michael Kirk Moore, which is his full name, is a respected 59-year-old physician, a former Navy flight surgeon from Utah, who faced up to 35 years in prison, not for harming patients, but for honoring his oath to do no harm. With informed parental consent, he administered saline in place of COVID vaccines to children and adults facing coercive mandates that threaten their jobs, education, military service, and even life-saving transplants. Dr. Moore acted out of compassion and ethics, not criminal intent. He treated patients free of charge during the COVID crisis. And I would say scamdemic, as I always do. He made house calls. He stood by those whose medical autonomy was under attack. Yet he was relentlessly prosecuted, jailed for 22 days, and stripped of hospital privileges and board certification, all for prioritizing informed consent and patient safety over tyrannical federal mandates, fully backed by the AMA, which in my opinion is a criminal organization, and other medical associations. I editorialized a little bit there. The federal case was riddled with jurisdictional flaws, suppressed evidence, and procedural violations. Still, Dr. Moore remained unwavering. Then, on July 12, 2025, just 5 days into trial, Attorney General Pam Bondi dismissed all charges, publicly recognizing the unjust nature of the prosecution. She credited Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene and Senator Mike Lee for their advocacy in securing this outcome. And this was more than a legal win. It was a stand for truth, ethics, and freedom. Dr. Moore didn't act out of defiance. He acted out of duty. He maintained his integrity and stood by his Hippocratic oath. And he was right to stand the way he did. So we are extremely pleased to have him on with us. But first, a little housekeeping. Just remember, we are severely banned on Facebook, whether you're watching us on the Two Guys Drinking Coffee or the Patriot Pulse page. Click, like, share. If you're seeing us on X or on Twitter, X or Rumble, subscribe to our channels, and you'll help us overcome the algorithms that are shadow banning us. But for right now, without further ado, I want to bring Dr. Moore onto the platform here. And good morning, Kirk. And I may call you Kirk, right?
Yes, you may.
All right, very good. Kirk, good morning. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I wasn't that wasn't hyperbole when I said I really considered you a medical freedom fighter for what you did. You stood for what was right. And really took the slings and arrows that the government threw at you. So my hat's off to you and all those other people standing up for freedom as well. As I said off screen, this is going to be more, your opportunity to tell your story. But the very first question I do have that maybe will help get this ball rolling. Start out by telling us a little bit. As I understand it, you're a plastic surgeon with a private clinic. So, how did you get involved with what I call the jabs in the first place? Because this is an area you most often see PCPs handling. So, tell us a little bit about that to launch the conversation.
Well, good morning, Jim. Thanks for having me on. Let me put my phone away and get it away. It's vibrating. Thanks for having me on. How do you get involved in this? I tell the story, and it's true. It's gotten to be part of my, it's just part of my makeup now. Early 2020, I kind of thought that this was really a bad virus coming out of China. Regardless of, I didn't really care whether it was coming out of a lab. I didn't care if it was because of pangolin, made up with, a bat. I didn't really care what it was. I was just worried about it. So I shut my office down a couple of days later, after having had the chance to kind of understand what things were and review science and review the articles and review everything that was out. I had completely done a 180. I was ready to go right back to work again. I realized that this thing was nothing but a scamdemic, like you said. Yeah. Literally took me 36 hours. So at that point, because I'm a doctor and because, a lot of friends and family and neighbors and everybody else kind of know that I'm a doctor, they're coming to me saying, hey, how do I treat this? Or what do I do? We didn't have that many cases at least at the time. And I just said, well, it's a flu. So here, let's do this. And then I started reading and studying. I found Vladimir Zelenko, Dr. Zelenko out of New York. I found, Peter McCullough. He was putting together I think it took him a couple of months, but he had his own algorithm that he'd put together through AAPS. I found Paul Merrick and Pierre Corey, Brian Tyson, George Fareed. There were a bunch of people that were out there putting out videos, putting out, algorithms and treatments. So I just started following what they were doing. I'd reviewed I'd reviewed the microbiology on all this. That was part of what got me to turn around. I just, I wasn't a huge microbiology fan in medical school. Just relied on the pathologist and what their reports would say. Hey, you treat this, this bug here with this antibiotic and it goes away. I didn't pay that much more attention to it. But that's how I got involved. The three things that I tell people in terms of where I ended up and why I ended up under federal indictment was the first one when there was just, everybody's telling us, all these quote unquote experts telling us that there's no treatment. That's not in our makeup. It shouldn't be in our makeup as doctors. We don't just abdicate our responsibility to some, bureaucrat somewhere and not treat people. You don't just, look at somebody who's not feeling good and just kind of feel good about saying, just keep not feeling good. And when you feel really bad, then we'll call an ambulance and send you to the hospital.
Exactly.
So that was strike number one. Strike number two was when absolutely everybody was doing the exact same thing. So everybody from the city, county, state, country level was doing the exact same thing with the exact same argument. It goes back to, that whole thing. It was all part of that Build Back Better kind of, scenario where everybody's just kind of saying, oh, we're all going to do the same. And, we can't agree on what kind of potatoes we're going to have for Thanksgiving dinner together with your sister, or cousins, or, mom, dad, whoever.
Right.
And yet we have 208 countries that are so diverse in their cultures that we're all going to do the same thing. So that was strike number two for me. Yeah. And then strike number three was we're not going to get back to normal until we put a needle in everybody's arm on 8.4 billion people. And so I just, I knew it was all fake. I knew that I had to do something. And, just to kind of push this forward a little bit. I'm treating people, I'm taking care of people. I'm telling them, hey, let's not take the vaccine. It's not going to be good for you. I'm against vaccines to begin with. I have hated them since 1989. My kids, my daughter's only partially vaccinated until she had a vaccine injury. My son's never been vaccinated. The last vaccine I had was in 2011 for a yellow fever shot when I tried to bribe the nurse to not give it to me to go to Ghana on a humanitarian trip. And I just don't believe in them. I don't think they're necessary. And I think what we're seeing now in the news is tantamount to that. I think people are finally waking up. So but I was willing again, just to stand on the sidelines and, let everybody else take it, not do anything about it. I was telling my patients, my friends, my family, anybody that would ask, that it's not worth it. It's not, we haven't had a vaccine for cancer in 100 years. We're not getting a vaccine for AIDS. We haven't had a vaccine for AIDS in 40 years. And now all of a sudden the common cold virus, we're going to solve the common flu that's been with us since, since the dawn of time. So I just knew that there was something really wrong with that narrative. And I can't imagine, I struggle with this, Jim, daily. I just had a quote unquote meltdown last night with a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, talking to him about just how bad the medical profession has gotten this point. Because I'm really flabbergasted by the fact that, we're so few on this side of the aisle, if you want to call it, or on this side of the argument, this side of the freedom movement. It amazes me that people can't think and can't have common sense. One of my co-defendant, Chris Anderson, used to go into a grocery store when they had masks requirements. And, she would say, she would walk in without a mask, and somebody would come up to her and she'd go, I have CS. I can't wear a mask. And so finally somebody asked her, one of her friends that was with her finally said, what does CS mean? And she goes, common sense. I love that. I found out about that just a few weeks ago. It's pretty funny. Anyway, so like I said, I was willing to stand on the sidelines until they mandated it, until the Biden administration started mandating it in the spring of 21.
Yeah, there was so many points that you brought out there that I could comment on here, but just your very last one. It was really very, very interesting how I think the government handled this, and I say interesting in the sense of tyrannically interesting, in that they always kept an arm's length away from the idea of mandating. What they did was they coerced the AMA and the doctors and said, you'll lose your license if you don't do this. They coerced the airlines and said, if you don't, play by our rules, we'll shut you down. Or, so they got all private industries, private practices to go along with this. I mean, doctors, I have friends in Canada that are still under very much oppressed status, but they lost their license. They lost their medical license.
Yeah.
For just saying, no, we're not going to play your game.
I mean, they did do that through, private industry. And we've seen that through a couple of the court cases that are still working their way through the system. But they also did through OSHA. They did do the mandates here in the United States for companies over 100, which was the one that the Supreme Court shut down. But they had another one, which was for healthcare workers, that the Supreme Court upheld. We did have some government function. Look, I struggle with the whole concept of public health. In my opinion, there's no such thing as public health. If one person isn't healthy, then the next people aren't healthy. So you have to treat that patient that's right there in front of you. And if you treat that patient there in front of you, and they're healthy, then that makes everybody else around them healthy. This concept of, treating somebody and giving somebody a shot or giving them a vaccine to prevent transmission, which one, we know that this didn't do. And two, in my opinion, it's never been shown that vaccines prevent transmission on any level with any vaccines. So, this whole safe and effective narrative been around for, 250 years. It's just all fake. There's nothing about it that's fake. That hearing yesterday that they had with Senator Johnson, that got my blood boiling. This guy, I'm going to say his name because he is just, I'll tell him to his face. I wanted to crawl through my phone and just grab his neck and strangle him. He said that he had 661 articles that he had produced that showed the safe and effective narrative was true for all of the children's vaccines on our current schedule. And Aaron Siri took them down one by one, block by block. And the only argument that he could say was, I didn't give you enough time to look through all 661 articles because I didn't submit those until 2:30 a.m. last night. So how did you look at them all? And Aaron Siri just said to him, well, I've got a crack team and I knew what you guys were going to do. And so that's exactly what I did. And so in 10 hours, I managed to go through all 661 of those articles and realized that there was not one of them in there that proved or had any value to proving the safe and effective narrative for any of our childhood vaccines that's currently on the schedule. So, this guy, Dr. Jake Scott out of California somewhere, is a total shill for the pharma industry. I call him Big Pharma. And it's just absolutely asinine that these people have no qualms whatsoever about poisoning and murdering our fellow human beings and kids starting from the time that they're in utero. It's astounding to me.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I've got to hint to you. I don't have a percentage. I don't know, but I would have to say, Kirk, that you're a, and I mean this nicely, you're a bit of a unicorn in the medical profession because you're willing to say the truth instead of parroting what the AMA and all the other medical associations tell you to parrot. Now, how many are there physicians like you in the country or in the world? I don't know, but I'll bet you it's a really small percentage. Because to another point you made, it was amazing. It didn't matter whether you were watching a newscaster, whether you're watching an interview with a physician or another healthcare, they parroted, almost verbatim, word for word, the exact same narrative. Safe and effective. Get it? Stop the spread. You could have just recorded one and just put it on repeat, and there would have been no difference. So,
sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Jim, look, I'm 6 months ago, I was nowhere near this vocal. 3 years ago, I was nowhere near this vocal. I'm done self-censoring. Okay. I got canceled off of the reason why my Twitter handle is @Moore22K instead of @Dr. Kirk Moore or Dr. Moore MD or Dr. Kirk Moore MD, whatever, is because I got canceled off of that platform at least 2 or 3 times. I closed my Facebook account because it was not even worth trying to post anything on there, even to my small group. I think I had 450 friends. Friends, they're just people that are acquaintances that you get to know that, hell, you have a Facebook profile. Great. But typically you have 20, 30, 40 friends or whatever that you can kind of reach out to on a daily basis and say hi or whatever. And so all I was doing was just posting articles and literally posting articles. I wasn't even commenting on them, but these were things that were out in the public sphere, and I'm posting things on there and I'm getting canceled, literally getting into Facebook jail at least twice a month for, 7 to 10 days.
Right.
And I got done and tired of that. I just canceled my account. I just went on with my own, with my own life, and I just kind of took care of things. Even some of my own friends and colleagues, I don't even talk to them anymore because they're still looking at me going, you're you're crazy. Why, why did you do this? I've had this question asked to me a number of times. How many of those people have come back to you and said, hey, Kirk or Dr. Moore or whatever, I'm sorry, you were right. And I can tell you that that number is exactly 0. None of them have bothered to pick up the phone, email me, text me, and say, hey, Kirk, I kind of had it a little bit wrong. Or even if they didn't have it wrong, for them to come out and say, hey, you were right. I'm glad you did this. I'm glad you took care of the patients that you needed to do. Look, can you blame or can you accuse me of doing something wrong in this area? Meaning, did I write down that somebody got a vaccine on a fake COVID card? Look, there's this law that we wrote, I think in 1974. It's called the Paperwork Reduction Act. And the Paperwork Reduction Act, in spite of what it says, or the name of it, it's just kind of like what's the Inflation Reduction Act, I think, that Biden put through. Right. I mean, it didn't reduce any of the paperwork, but what it did do is it required any government forms that come to the public sphere that are used in the interaction with the public have to go through a vetting process. Okay. They have to go through a vetting process. They have to be approved. And then they have to come with a little log number or something, bottom left corner, bottom right corner, somewhere on there has to have, it's like all your IRS paperwork. You look at the form and it has something and it shows what the number of the form is, and then the last revision date that it was done on there. Right. Well, I filed a case, or I filed a hearing or a motion to have my case thrown out because this didn't abide by the Paperwork Reduction Act, by a federal law that's in there. And the judge said, no, that doesn't apply in this case. Well, why doesn't it apply? Every other document in our government has to have a Paperwork Reduction Act, has to go through a vetting process. And now all of a sudden this one here doesn't. Why does this get, a free pass? And again, there was no answer to that. It was just that's my decision, live with it.
Well, it's because judges legislate from the bench anymore. That's exactly what it is.
Well, I mean, they find something that matches their argument or the way that they look at things or the way that they, want to believe that things should be. And so then they say, well, let me just find something that I can, that fits with my narrative or fits with my opinion on this, and I'll use that to back my argument. You're exactly right. Our Constitution is what? 2 pages, 3 pages. Our original, Article 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution, are what you can write them on like 6, 8 by 10 pages or something. It's nuts. And we have how many rules and regulations now? I mean, for every law that we make, we can probably go back in history and find an exact opposite one that's no longer, that's no longer being viewed or seen or has been forgotten. But look, so they were claiming that I falsified a record. Well, what records are there? Why is this even a true record? How is it any different from somebody? Well, it has a CDC logo on it. Okay. This has a logo on it, I mean, it's kind of like, so what? Did the CDC print that? No, the CDC farmed it out to somebody else to print it. Well, how do you know that I didn't get the same stamp that they had? So this is an official document, as much as I can tell. It's, the whole system is so screwed up. But again, I'm done. I'm done self-censoring. I'll probably never get in front of a Senate hearing because, I'm not going to sit there quietly and let somebody, Jake Scott, sit up there, Dr. Jake Scott from California, get up there and talk about, all these 661 articles that prove that vaccines are safe and effective in the United States. He's lying, and he knows he's lying, and how he sleeps at night, I don't know. And how it is that he can go to bed at night knowing that he potentially poisoned and murdered and maimed, human beings that are under his care. I don't get it.
There's a saying, and I believe it's 100% true, is that studies will always come out and agree 100% with those who are funding them. You can get if you pay enough money, you can have a study say anything you want. So,
well, look, Jim, our system is so screwed up right now. Okay, Big Pharma, they are the ones that design the study. They hire the investigators. They pay the people to collate the data. They then pay the investigators, or they pay the reviewers to review the data. They then that are in these journals. They then pay the journals the reprints that they need to get in order to keep the journals viable, and they in turn then pay the representatives to go around to the physicians with this fake data that's out there. Marcia Angel in 2000, I think, or 2001, quit her job as the chief editor of the New England Journal of Medicine because she said that at least half the data that's out there is fake. And look, you're absolutely right. Okay, when you are the one that's responsible for doing it, and you're in charge of making and paying those paychecks, it's kind of like getting a fair shake in our legal system right now. When the government is paying your public defender, who do you think that the public defender is going to stick up for? Do you think they're really looking out for you? Okay, but the flip side of that is you probably can't afford to get your own attorney to fight this. I mean, I spent almost $1 million fighting this case against the federal government. They probably spent 4 to 5 times that much. And in the end, they don't care about justice. They don't care about truth. They don't care about any of that. They just want to win. That's all it is for them. It's just a win. And for me, it was a hatred thing. They just wanted to prove that, or they wanted to show this is what's going to happen to you if you go against our narrative. And that's their sole motivation. Go ahead.
Let me break in here for a minute, because you bring up a couple of interesting points here. In one, I think is a terrible flaw in our legal system, because the government, or whether it's a county government or whether it's a state or federal, they have absolutely unlimited resources. I mean, they did this with General Michael Flynn.
Yeah.
They just prosecuted him until they bankrupted him and he couldn't defend himself any longer.
Right.
And they two flaws in that, 2 problems with it. Number one, they're using unlimited public funds to do it. But in essence, what they're doing, because you pay taxes, they're prosecuting you with your tax money.
Right. Well, they also accuse me of defrauding myself, because my tax money paid for that quote unquote vaccine that they claimed I misused. So, they gave me my own tax dollars back and said that I misused them.
That's crazy. You brought up another point, and I got to ask this question. It just popped into my head while you were talking, because you were mentioning about the studies and all this. How much, based on what you said there, and I don't know the background of all the medical reviews and reports, but how much validity then should we really give to what they call quote unquote peer review studies?
At this point, zero. Pierre Corey has been talking about this for the last couple of years. And he's been out and talked about it in public. Look, there was an article that was just published that showed that from 2020 to 2022, in the 4 major journals that are in the world right now, the 4 major journals, the New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of the American Medical Association, the British Medical Journal, and the Lancet. Those are the 4 top journals. If you get an article published in there, everybody used to be, ecstatic about it. Oh my gosh, I passed peer review. Well, from 2020 to 2022, those reviewers, those peers, were paid by the pharmaceutical industry $1.06 billion. Over $1 billion was paid to those people, and almost 60% of them got an additional $153,000 in research grants. $1 billion. And and we want to say that our that our medical system isn't corrupted. I mean, in 3 years alone, that's what the pharma industry paid out. Okay, to just those reviewers in those 4 journals.
That's incredible. I'll tell you, and I think my opinion is reflected by a lot of others that the last 5 years, let's go back to 2020, the medical profession, and with all due respect to your profession, you're a physician.
No, my profession deserves no respect right now.
Okay. All right. And that's what I was just going to say. Their credibility is zero in my book. Their credibility is absolutely zero, because when you go to a physician now, can I feel assured that he's giving me advice or a prescription or whatever based on my best interest, or based on who's paying him the most money to do it?
Well, so here's the thing. And I'm not bashing individual physicians, because they are completely brainwashed. And they're either so busy, look, they're taking care of their families, they're taking care of their business, they're doing everything the best they can. They have been truly brainwashed from the day that they started medical school. Okay. Our system has been corrupted since 1910. And even prior to that, but the gosh darn, I'm blanking on the name of it, but it was a Rockefeller report that he functioned, that he funded. Anyway,
Yeah.
And since that time, they've owned the medical schools. They own the medical schools. They own the textbooks. They own the education system. I already talked about how much they own the journals. And so, yes, these doctors are kind of snowed. All right. They're just like, hey, I don't disbelieve that. And even though Marsha Angel and Richard Smith and Richard Horton and these chief editors from those 4 major journals have come out and claimed how much fraud there is in the system, and they quit the system because of that. It's not out in the mainstream media, because you know what? Big Pharma owns the mainstream media. 70% of their revenue comes from Big Pharma. Who owns our politicians? Our Big Pharma owns our politicians. That was on full display last week. And they own our medical organizations, the American Medical Association, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, the American Association of Pediatrics, the American Internal Medicine Association, all of them. Every single one of those is paid and funded by, Big Pharma. And so it's crazy the amount of infiltration that they've gotten in there. And by the way, Jim, I'm not suicidal. Okay. I'm really happy with my life right now. I feel really good. I've got, 2 really great kids. I've got a good family. I'm happy with my life. So, if, just putting that out there.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, and sometimes that is said tongue in cheek, because because we don't actually look at people and wonder that. But there have been so many cases in the news, or actually in the alternative news, because the mainstream media doesn't report on it, but whistleblowers and physicians and researchers that have spoken out have come to mysterious ends, or they've had these horrific accidents that have taken them out. And anybody with an ounce of common sense and critical thinking, this is just too coincidental to be just that, coincidental. There is an attack on the truth movement, and we all live with that are bringing. I mean, I don't put myself in anywhere category, except I bring these people out to our audience and let them hear them, people like you. But it's a sad state of affairs when we have to be concerned about, boy, I don't even know how to say it. It's not just government. It's Big Pharma. It's people of influence, people of money that have done that to us. I'm right in the middle of a book. Again, you bring me, what you're saying brings thoughts into my head here. I'm right in the middle of a book called Murder by Injection by a person by the name of Eustace Mullins, who's no longer with us. And interestingly enough, he talks about in that book the AMA and how I mentioned this in my monologue. After reading this book, I'm thoroughly convinced the AMA is a criminal organization. It got its start that way. It got its start from the Rockefeller Foundation. And I'd urge anybody that wants to dig deeper into what the dark side of the medical profession, read that book. And interestingly enough, Amazon has it listed in literature and fiction. even though the book is full of facts and proof of what he says or said in the book, it's listed under fiction. So that tells you a little bit about the mainstream media and even the booksellers out there. But let's get back into, if you don't mind, let's get back into your situation that you had to deal with the government and the trial. When I first heard about your story, which was quite a while ago, it had not gone to trial yet, and I was really surprised to hear that you were actually in 5 days into the trial when you learned that the charges were dropped. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's amazing that it went that far. And is it true also? Explain the legal part of it, because I understand did they actually charge you with a crime or just indict you? How did that work?
Well, so sometime in 2022, the Utah Health Department got a complaint from an HR department that one of their employees had gotten a card when they knew that she would never have succumbed and never would have gone through and gotten a vaccine. So they called the Utah Health Department. They said, who is this PSI company? And that stands for Plastic Surgery Institute. We don't think that they gave this lady a true vaccine, but she has a card and it has their stamp on it. So that was in January of 2022. Instead of, and I found this out during trial, instead of doing what they claim that they do, or that they are supposed to do based upon their, modus operandi, their MO, they are supposed to call me and question me. They are supposed to shut me down from ordering any further product until they determine what it is that I'm doing, which they did not do. The first thing they did was they called the FBI, and then the FBI said, "Ooh, we've got a big fish on the line here, and let's reel him in." So they ran a sting operation on me twice. Had two people come in and get a card without a shot, and then in January of 23, they then showed up at my office in force, 10 or 11 officers. They didn't have their guns drawn, but they showed up, lined up all on my staircase. I'm on the second floor of my building, and had 4 or 5 officers in my lobby, and served a search warrant on us. I didn't know this at the time, but that was when my grand jury indictment had been unsealed. And they confiscated my phone and my office manager's phone with a search warrant. I tried to question my staff, and they were smart enough to say, I don't know, and no, thank you very much. And then they left. We found out that we had actually been indicted through a reputation company that sent me an email a week later saying, "Hey, we saw this article that was written about you. We can help you with your reputation. Just give us a call." And in that article, that I read, I can't remember. I used to think that it was a heavy.com article. They did write an article about me, but I don't think that was the one that was in the email. But ultimately, I found out that my arraignment was on the 26th of January, a week after that. And we never got served. We never got paperwork. We never got subpoenaed. We never had any kind of arrest warrant or anything out for us. We just found out through a newspaper article that we had been, indicted, and that we needed to show up for court. So we showed up on the 26th, found out what the charges were: fraud, conspiracy, because it was more than, conspiracy to commit fraud because it was more than one person, and then counterfeiting, which is what I was explaining to you earlier about, filling out the cards. And so they were claiming that I had counterfeited those cards by filling them out with the lot numbers of the vaccines that I'd had, but I hadn't really performed the activity that was required for me to do that. So they claimed that was counterfeiting. Subsequent to that, we went, they filed a motion to preclude a necessity defense, which means that, I couldn't make the argument that what I was doing was the lesser of two evils, and giving people a saline shot or not treating them with, the COVID jab or COVID vaccine that they called a vaccine, was, by me not treating them with that, and giving them a saline shot or not treating them at all was actually safer than what they were doing. And then we went to court over that, had an oral hearing in October of 24. But it was just the process is the punishment. Let's keep pushing this, let's keep kicking the can down the road. We needed some time to kind of put our defense together when they took away our chance to, for necessity defense. We had to kind of retool our arguments. And I spent 2 stints in jail. One, because I challenged the federal jurisdiction over me, both as a person and as a business, and over the charges. So they put me in jail for 12 days. And then I spent another 22 days in jail because I sent my co-defendants a text message saying, "Hey, we have a hearing tomorrow. You should be there with your attorneys." And because that was a violation of my pretrial restrictions to communicate with my co-defendants about the case, they threw me in jail for 22 days and wanted to keep me there until July, when my trial was going to happen.
That's incredible.
Anyway.
All right. So again, there was an indictment, but there was no arrest warrant, and yet they put you in jail. The whole legal process behind your case is just, in my estimation, is just convoluted anyway. They did whatever the hell they wanted to do, almost seemingly on a whim to again persecute you or to make you an example. And I'll ask that question too. How much of this do you think was meant to send a message to other physicians? Don't you ever try this, or this is what's going to happen to you?
Well, I know that was the case. And there's no doubt in my mind that was their motivation behind this whole thing is, this is what's going to happen to you if you push back against the government. Don't do what we tell you to do. The reality is, Jim, there are no COVID laws. Okay. There are no laws that require me to inject somebody with a poison that is given to me or is sold to me or however it is that I have it. There is no law that requires me to do that. As a matter of fact, the law that was violated here was to have people display a card and disclosing their medical information to a third party that has no right to know what their medical history is. So that's a violation on that end. And it's also a violation on the other end for that entity, that third party, to require you to disclose your medical information, to be a part of, of society and to contribute to, and to be a contributor in this world. So those were actual laws that were violated. There were no COVID laws that were violated. They made a big stink about this in my case, about the lawful governmental functions of the CDC. The CDC, and we filed a motion to this, and again, the judge ruled against us. The CDC has no lawful governmental functions. They are an advisory agency only. It says it in their charter. Okay. There is nothing that comes out of the CDC that is a law. Okay.
Right.
They have no legislative capability. They can't sign anything into law. They can make a recommendation to the states and to their jurisdictions and to the health departments. But there is no obligation on any of those health departments to take any of those recommendations to heart or implement them or do anything. Just the fact that they do it is a different issue. But, and even on their end, the Utah Health Department has no legislative capability either. So, it's just kind of one of those things, just because it's been done over and over and over and over and over again over the last 200 years. It's become kind of just part of the process. Everybody thinks that that's, the law, and that's what's happened. But that's the reality here. So yeah, they threw me in jail twice. They were making an example of me. They hated me. They looked at me with a level of disdain that was just astounding. I mean, what did I do to him?
Yeah.
It was like an adverse. I get that you're adversaries. Okay. And I get that you're fighting against each other, but I mean, they were rude to me. They were nasty to me. They gave me looks like I just belonged, in some hellhole somewhere, off where they wouldn't have to ever come and talk to me or see me again. I mean, they were happy about it when I was in jail. I mean, you could almost see it on their face, with the pleasure that they took by watching me get, put in the chains and handcuffs and perp walked out of the courthouse. And the way they treated me during trial was just astounding.
Yeah. Moving away from the medical discussion for a moment and to the legal and the government part of it, I'll make two comments here. One is in our face every day. The judiciary in this country is, for the most part, completely corrupted. In that, and my proof to that statement is, in that they'll let people go on cashless bail that committed murder. They'll let people, it's like a revolving door in and out of the justice system, putting criminals back on the street. But they'll take a person like you that stood up for your oath to do no harm, as the monologue said, and you were doing what was best for your patients, and they apply a whole different level of justice to you than what they do to actual criminals out there that are doing harm to, are a danger to society. So that's the first thing. And the second point on the laws, people seem to forget, and our government has a very short memory when it comes to this. Our I won't say government, our bureaucracy, our administrative government has a short memory about the Constitution. According to the Constitution, the only body that can make laws is the legislature. Yet there, agencies are coming out with mandates all the time that are quote unquote considered laws, that if you break them, there are consequences, and you're living proof of that.
Well, the Chevron doctrine, which was the Supreme Court case that was ruled on in 2024, came out and basically said exactly that. Okay, that it was an attempt to kind of reverse and roll back all of these rule-making capabilities of all these agencies and three-letter agencies that are out there that have been making all these rules that U.S. citizens have to abide by. We tried to use that in our motion that the CDC has no lawful governmental functions, therefore they can't require me to do anything. And again, the judge, just kind of like, yeah, no, that doesn't apply in this case. I don't know how it doesn't apply, but he found some way around it to say that it doesn't work or it doesn't apply. And you're absolutely right. It's it's not a legal system anymore. It's a lawfare system, and it's in a total abuse of the system. And I've said this, and I'll keep saying it. It's not about the truth. It's not about justice. It's just about winning. And the process is the punishment. You mentioned General Flynn earlier. Absolutely. This is what they want to do. These governments and agencies just think that they're above the law, and they are going to go after you with an unlimited taxpayer funded system and organization, and they don't really care. Again, once they indict you, you are now a notch in their belt if they can win. And that's really what it comes down to. If they win, then they show it. And if they beat me, then that would have put every other doctor, fear of God, into all those other doctors out there. Look, they're going to put Dr. Moore, he took care of his patients, and I may agree with him in large measure what he did. But they put him in jail for doing the right thing. Where does that leave me? And that's exactly what they were trying to do.
Yeah, you made a comment earlier about the Constitution as well, and I thought of it then, is that document that was able to be printed on an oversized piece of paper, parchment, is now a 3,000-page book that's about this big, and it's all through judiciary overreach that we have got to this point. I mean, every time a judge renders an opinion on a constitutional issue, it goes into that into that book, and the judiciary is just completely out of control. I don't know how it ever got this way, but it's out of control. Let's bring it up to present day. All right, so you got. It wasn't that long ago. I don't even know what the date was. I have it in my notes somewhere, but you can
July
help me.
12th.
On July 10th?
July 12th was the day that it was dismissed.
All right. So Pam Bondi orders them to drop the charges. And again, that was evidently Marjorie Taylor Greene and Senator Mike Lee were advocating for you on this. Tell us a little bit about that process that you can as far as, you got these two people that are advocating for you. They get a hold of Pam Bondi and the Justice Department. Run us through that process that happened there.
So our trial started on July 7th, which was a Monday. We had a small rally out front. We finally had some local some of our local politicians here in the state of Utah. They came out in our defense. The Mike Schultz, the House Majority Leader, was here. The Speaker of the House, I think he is now. So he came out in our defense, and a couple of other people there. There was, a bunch of people with signs on the street. We had 2 days of jury selection. During that jury selection, the prosecution accused us, Chris Anderson and myself, of jury tampering because we retweeted or we reposted something about the rally that was out on the street, and one of the prosecutors claimed that we were jury tampering, and that we were purposely doing it to try to intimidate them. The judge kind of shot them down. Anyway, we had 2 days of jury selection. We got the jury selected late in the afternoon on Tuesday. Trial started on Wednesday. Their two main witnesses that they had were Chris Duggar and Gary Disbrow. Chris Duggar was the CDC, head of the CDC, what they called their COVID task force within the CDC, not the one that the president had in the White House, but the one that the CDC was running. And he'd been a bureaucrat in their system. They went line by line through his resume. It took about 2 hours just to kind of get through everything and all of the public health stuff that he'd done across the world, and all of his experience and why he was, it was an appropriate position for him to be the COVID czar within the CDC. And then it turned out that, he called us the enemy. So people that were anti-vax and didn't want to give the vaccine were actually enemies. So this is good. That tells you the mentality that these people have within the government, where they can call half of the United States, at least, and other United States citizens the enemy because you disagree with what it is that they're doing. Gary Disbrow, who is the head of BARDA, and BARDA was the agency that negotiated the contract with the big pharma organizations. And by the way, this was a DoD contract. Sasha Latipova, Catherine Watt have exposed that, where it was actually a Department of Defense. It's the reason why it was called Operation Warp Speed, is because it was a government-funded and a government and an actual government operation, just like Tucker Carlson said, Pfizer doesn't do operations, Moderna doesn't do operations, our government does operations. So Operation Warp Speed, run by General Perna, and Gary Disbrow was integral. He was, intimately involved with the negotiation between the pharmaceutical companies and the DoD, and they had a contract with all three. Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Moderna had a contract, but they tried to submit the contract that was redacted. We said, no, you can't you can't submit a redacted contract. They went back and got an unredacted contract. And then after reading it, they said, we can't submit it. We're not going to submit this contract. And their excuse is that ASPR, again, another agency that's slightly above BARDA, whatever, and BARDA wouldn't allow that contract to be presented. I told Tucker in my interview that I think there were two things. One is I think it predated 2019. And so it would show that it was a preordained, just like Anthony Fauci said in 2017, there will be a there will be a pandemic during Donald Trump's administration. Well, lo and behold, that's what happened, right?
Yeah.
And I also think that it's going to show the level of involvement of our Department of Defense and exactly what it was. I truly believe, and I think the evidence will show eventually, that everything that was done with COVID was done by our own federal government, our own Department of Defense, and all of our agencies within that Department of Defense. And all they did is they paid pharma and Pfizer and Moderna and J&J to slap their labels on a product that they had developed, that they had put into place, and they had organized, and then they were the ones that distributed it. So, and that's the reason why that contract didn't come into play. I thought we had a really good week. Friday afternoon comes around, we leave court. We were planning on coming back on Monday. I'm planning on having a meeting on Saturday afternoon with my attorneys to talk about whether I was going to get put on the stand or not. And then Saturday morning at 8:35 in the morning, I get a phone call from my attorney telling me that Attorney General Bondi has told the prosecutors to pull back and that they're going to dismiss my case. This is, and I don't know of any other case in the history of our country that has ever been dismissed mid-prosecution. Okay, they had not finished presenting their case yet, and I can't find a case where that has happened. There are cases where charges have been changed, where charges have been dropped, where they haven't met the criteria for, and brought enough evidence to do it, so that they had to kind of, drop things or change the direction of the court case. But never have I seen a case that's been dismissed in the middle of the prosecution like it did with this. And again, let me finish up. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Mike Lee, Thomas Massie, RFK Jr. all had a huge role in this. I thank God to them. I met her. Marjorie Taylor Greene, gave her a huge hug, cried, and she saved my life. So it's if it weren't for those rallies, if it weren't for an article that was published midweek, if it weren't for my son's speech that had 1.7 million views going viral,
I saw that.
It took an army. It took a village to do this. And that village really stood behind us and brought us through. So
I'm not sure if I got this term right, but when the charges were they dropped without prejudice, meaning that they
Yep.
cannot come back at you and bring this back up again in some other way? I mean, is there anything hanging over your head?
No, the charges are dropped with prejudice. I had to sign a form that said that I wasn't going to sue them for attorney's fees. That's called the Hyde Amendment. But I had to, but they did drop it. Hey, Jim, I've got an 8 o'clock meeting. So
right.
I hate to run, but
I appreciate you being on here today. Kirk, you brought a wealth of information and interesting stuff to our audience here. If you can give me one more second, we always pray over our guests and what you're doing. If you don't mind, I'd like to do that today. Fred normally does this, but in his absence, I will try. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the freedom fighters in this country and around the world, especially for Dr. Kirk here and the fact that he stood up for right and stood up for the people that he was taking care of for their health, and stood up for principle. And we just ask your blessing over him, and we ask you to be with his family and give him strength to go on. And we just thank all the freedom fighters in the world, but we lift him up in particular today. And we ask all this in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I think there is
amen.
This Gibson Go, is that still valid on the screen there?
Absolutely. It is. Thank you very much.
This is how you can support Dr. Kirk's efforts here and help him recruit some of the ill-gotten gains that the legal profession got because of the prosecution. So I'll let you go. Thank you very much for joining us today, Kirk, and we'll be in touch. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, Tim, thanks for having me. I'm sorry for cutting it short. I just realized.
That's all right. Well, we're right at 10 o'clock, so that was perfect.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right. Now. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Yep. Okay. That was great, everybody. I like I say, this is, there are freedom fighters that will speak out, and then there are freedom fighters that are putting real skin in the game. And they're suffering the slings and arrows of outrageous fortunes. And to me, I hold them up in a little bit higher esteem because they're willing to pay the price, just like General Flynn, just like Rudy Giuliani and others. There are freedom fighters out there, and as long as they're out there, we're going to continue to try to bring them to you. So we appreciate everybody being on here today. I think Fred will be back with us next week. At this point here, we have another guest on next week. If my memory serves me correctly, it's Steve Stern, who is an election integrity advocate. He's also very big in the precinct level movement of moving the needle, if you will, towards the conservative side of getting people out to vote. We do this on a precinct level, and he's going to be here to talk to us about that. So for now, thank you very much for tuning in today and watching the show. We hope you got something out of it. And we will see you again next week, hopefully. And I guess I got to do this myself because I don't have somebody to say this with her. But our tagline, regardless what you're doing today or where you are, we want you to be blessed. And as Fred would say, and Jim before him, and be a blessing to others.